Israel's cut off electricity to Gaza. This affects the drinking water for the area. Chief National Correspondent Matt Gutman is in Tel Aviv. Good morning, Matt.
We'll talk about this in a second. We'll get to this in a moment. Obviously, before we talk about like Israel doing Israel shit once again, they hit the genocide, do more genocide button again. Okay, they've decided it's time to do more genocide again. It's time to do more Israel shit again. Shutting off power to Gaza, impacting the drinking water in the area, and also shutting off last week humanitarian aid from going in as well. Israel's back at it again, doing the things that it was doing, surely for self-defense, of course. I mean, it's always self-defense. When is it not, you know? Putting on shirts like you got 126 on the TISM test, positive and amicable. Wait, what? Did I put the shirt on weird too? Like, what's happening? Wait, even the way I put my shirt on, you got issues with? It's crazy. What should I tell my younger family members who are on visas, green cards, and who want to still be a part of Free Palestine movements? I don't want them to stop, obviously, but I don't want them to get deported. I will talk about that in a second. But this is something that is highly illegal. What the federal government is doing right now is highly illegal, and I'll tell you all about it in a moment. But for the time being, let's continue talking about Israel doing Israel things in Gaza.
Hey, good morning, George. That's right. Israel cutting off power to the lone facility in Gaza that was still receiving electricity from Israel. It was a desalination plant that we're told provided water to thousands, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in central Gaza. And of course, this comes a week after Israel cut off the flow of aid and goods into Gaza in order to try to pressure Hamas to continue that first phase of that ceasefire deal, which exchanged hostages for Palestinian prisoners. That as today, negotiations resuming between all the parties in Qatar. But those negotiations are being overshadowed by those side talks that the Trump administration was having directly with Hamas. And this breaks a massive taboo. Never before has any U.S. administration ever spoken directly to Hamas. We understand Israel was not happy about it, but the U.S. envoy who was leading those talks, Adam Bowler, said he wasn't just trying to negotiate the release of that lone Israeli-American hostage, Don Alexander, but the release of all of the hostages. Robin.
All right, Hannah, thanks to you.
ICE agents have arrested a Palestinian.
So the reason why, I mean, they basically admitted it, which is interesting, but the reason why Israel is doing this is because they're upset with the Trump administration having direct conversations with Hamas. And the Trump administration's response to this has actually been less than kind. Surprisingly enough, while on the one hand, Donald Trump in the United States of America is actively bringing on the clamps for anyone that dare speak out against Israel. On the other hand, the reasons as to why Israel did this, of course, is because they're upset. They're upset with the Trump administration. And when Israel gets upset with anybody, including the Trump administration or the Biden administration or Hezbollah or anyone, they only have one note, and that is to directly attack a group of people that they have power over. They directly go to attack. Central Committee, thank you for the raid, by the way. Hope you had a good stream. They go and they attack the Palestinians in Gaza. This is exactly what happened with Iran, for example. When Iran would respond to Israel, Israel's response back to Iran was rather measured in comparison to the way that Israel behaved in southern Lebanon or Israel behaved in Gaza. Iran would attack Israel, and in retaliation for Israel attacking Iran, and then what would Israel do? They would turn around and bomb Gaza viciously, more aggressively than they had prior, because their one speed, their one note is just always punishing. No matter what happens, they always get their licks in. They always punish the Palestinians. That's it. Why do they do that? Because they have purposely kept the Palestinian population vulnerable so they can do whatever they want to the Palestinian population, including, but not limited to, directly cutting off their humanitarian aid that the rest of the world is desperately trying to bring into Gaza, but then also cutting off their electricity like they have done this week. Now, the reasons as to why they're doing it is because of the anger and frustration that they feel towards the American government sidestepping Israel and going directly to Hamas to have talks with Hamas. Has any other administration directly communicated with terrorists? The answer is yes. I always thought it was we do not negotiate with terrorists. Yet this is the second time the Trump admin has publicly admitted to negotiating with terrorists. No, they do. It's ridiculous. The idea that we don't talk to terrorists is ridiculous. Oftentimes it's done through back channels. And the only reason why you heard about the Trump administration directly communicating with Hamas, okay, the only reason why you heard about it is because Israel leaked it. We are the terrorists. We don't care. What are you talking about? We're the arch terrorists on the planet. If you grew up outside of the sphere of American influence, your understanding of the United States of America is one that, you know, creates terror wherever it goes. That's the difference. A lot of people don't actually meet people from outside of the American sphere of influence, or more importantly, when they do meet people from the outside of the American sphere of influence, oftentimes those people are actually collaborators, or at least like, family members of people who have collaborated with the American government at a certain point. So they have a very different perspective on America. Obviously, they're here. So that's usually the reason why, you know, being here implies that they probably don't have as much anger and resentment towards America. So that will probably give you a very different perspective about whichever nation's population that we're talking about, one that you will not be able to get until you actually go there and meet the people. Okay? That's just kind of how it is. This is a generalization. This is not a rule, okay? I'm not saying that every single person who's Vietnamese, of Vietnamese descent, for example, is directly in support of the United States of America, or every single person who's Cuban living here is directly in support of the United States of America and hates Cuba or whatever. I'm not saying that at all. But if you're confused as to why, like, seemingly a big majority of these populations have an attitude that is like unconditionally pro-U.S., for example, or pro-U.S. foreign policy, especially older generations, that usually comes from the reality that when you come to the United States of America, that means you like the United States of America or its actions in your home nation. So, once again, still not a rule, okay? This is not a rule. This is a generalization that I'm engaging in that isn't necessarily always going to be correct, but I'm simply stating that, and there are multiple factors. There are multiple factors that also play a role in this, like assimilation, wanting to integrate as fast as possible, being victim to a lot of reactionary hate crimes initially, and in that process basically saying, no, you don't understand, I'm super pro-America, and just hamming it up, and then that becoming your front-facing policy, basically. There's also that side of this as well, because a lot of the people that come here, regardless of their background, do actually receive a lot of skepticism, a lot of criticism, and even attacks. Anyway, but I took a major sidestep here. Let's get back to the issue at hand. Here is a one-on-one with Adam Bowler, who is
Adam Bowler. Adam, thanks so much for joining us. Let's start on these direct negotiations with Hamas. First of all,
who is here to talk to Jake Tapper about the direct hostage negotiations that the American government was conducting with Hamas.
Obviously, controversial to directly negotiate with terrorists.
He's the United States envoy for hostages and has been given the rank ambassador by the president, Donald Trump. Adam Bowler, you might be shocked to find out, is first and foremost known as an American businessman and now a government official. Bowler started his career at Battery Ventures, a technology venture capital firm that focuses on investments in software and emerging technologies. He was an operating partner at Francisco Partners, a global private equity firm based in San Francisco, focusing on healthcare. Bowler founded and was chairman of Avalon Health Solutions. He has worked in the U.S. government from 2018 to 2021 on the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation. He was appointed director for the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation at the United States Department of Health and Human Services. Then he did International Development Finance Corporation. On July 10th, 2019, the President of the United States announced his intent to nominate Bowler for the position of Chief Executive Officer of the newly formed U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, a government agency formed through the Better Utilization of Investments Leading to Development BUILD Act as a consolidation of the Overseas Private Investment Corporation and the Development Credit Authority of the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, into one entity. The nomination was received by the Senate and confirmed unanimously by voice vote on 2019. He's done a bunch of stuff, including but not limited to trying to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative. And now he's back. He's back, and he's doing the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs. The reason why I'm talking about this, of course, is because Jake Tapper is interviewing him on why he is talking to the why he was talking to Hamas directly, but also not necessarily a bad thing, okay? Just letting you guys know. Trump administration talking directly to Hamas is not a bad thing at all. As a matter of fact, it is a good thing. It is certainly a good thing because the people that have spoiled all ceasefire conversations thus far are on the Israeli side. As a matter of fact, it's not even the Israeli hostage negotiators that are directly spoiling the hostage negotiations, as evidenced by the fact that the Israeli hostage negotiators will routinely come out and speak out against Benjamin Netanyahu. There is one primary party responsible for spoiling every single ceasefire negotiation and every single hostage negotiation. That man is Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu does have a broad mandate to do such things, certainly. Having said that, however, even the Israeli hostage negotiators are regularly saying, we do everything, and then we go back to Netanyahu, and he just says no. He adds new deals. He adds new spoilers, poison pill provisions over and over again, which is true. That is what has happened time and time again. Refusing to leave the Philadelphia corridor was a recent one that Benjamin has been holding on to as a poison pill provision over and over again. Anyway, so it's not a bad thing necessarily for the Trump administration to sidestep Netanyahu and directly talk to Hamas, especially because we still hold all the cards. Let's take a look.
Is reporting the top Israeli official, Ron Dermer, strongly discouraged you from talking directly with Hamas. He said it was a tense phone call. Tell us about that. Do you understand why Netanyahu, Dermer, others might be upset?
I do like that Jake Tapper is also kind of scolding him. Like, Jake Tapper, who hates Muslims, like just, has virile hatred in his heart for Muslims in general, is supposedly the guy who is the smarter guy in the room, right? Like, the Trump administration is stupid. Jake Tapper is smart, right? And yet, interestingly enough, here he is seemingly scolding this person for sidestepping Israel.
I do understand. I spoke with Ron, and I'm sympathetic. He has someone that he doesn't know well, making direct contact with Hamas. Maybe I would see them and say, look, they don't have horns growing out of their head. They're actually guys like us. They're pretty nice guys. So he doesn't know me, and there are big stakes. He lives in a country where if it sets certain precedents, then it will hurt.
How dare you say Hamas is not having horns growing out of their head? Excuse me. Excuse me. You are not allowed to say these things. How dare you say such things? Hamas certainly has horns growing out of their heads, sir.
Or help a lot of other people. So I understand the consternation and the concern, and I wasn't upset. At the same time, we're the United States. We're not an agent of Israel. We have specific interests.
I mean, it's true.
At play, and we did communicate back and forth. We had very specific parameters by which we fell, And the reality is what I wanted to do is jumpstart some negotiations that were in a very fragile place. And I wanted to say to Hamas, what is the end game that you want here? Not the dream end game, but what do you think is realistic at this point? Because until we know that, it's very hard to reach some sort of truce or some sort of end to hostility. So in the end, I think it was a very helpful meeting. It was very helpful to hear some back and forth. But I think Israel knows walking out of that, you know, it's not like Hamas got the world because I thought they were a bunch of nice guys.
Right.
I don't know why he kept repeating in this interview that he thought Hamas were a bunch of nice guys and then followed it up by saying, well, they didn't get the world because I thought they were a bunch of nice guys. Like, you know, but they're not, you know, they're just people like you and I. That right there is an insane thing to say. Okay. When I say that, when I say half of what he just said, people clamp on me and say I'm the worst terrorist loving person on the planet. Now, it's interesting because this is the hostage envoy for the United States having this conversation on Jake Tapper. Now, he walked back some of those statements for the record. Okay. Of course he did. He immediately got pressured. But it's shocking to see, even on accident, any sort of level-headed analysis and clarity coming from the Trump administration. How is that even possible? I do not understand, especially considering that the Trump administration is doing a metric ton of evil when it comes down to any sort of pro-Palestinian sentiment coming out of college campuses, which I'm going to be talking about in a second, okay? Which is, you know, some truly devastating things that the Trump administration is doing on that front, greatly undermining the American Constitution, and obviously we're not exactly too fond of that sort of stuff here, but I always maintain the position that there are things that work in America. There are some good things that the American government does, and the Trump administration is actively bouldering through the remainder of said good things.
How quickly could something come together in terms of this negotiation?
I think something could come together within weeks. I will say that I believe there is enough there to make a deal between what Hamas wants and what they've accepted, and what Israel wants and it's accepted. And I think I think there is a deal where they can get all of the prisoners out, not just the Americans.
So that was interesting, and Reuters confirmed Hamas held talks with U.S. officials about releasing Edon Alexander, a 21-year-old American-Israeli IDF soldier believed to be the last living American hostage in Gaza. Hamas political advisor Taher al-Nono said the discussions held in Doha were positive and flexible. He included talks on implementing the phased agreement to end the war. We informed the American delegation that we don't oppose the release of the prisoners within the framework of these talks, Nono told Reuters. Hamas spokesman Hazem Qassam echoed the same in his remarks to Al Jazeera Mubasher. We are ready to conduct a prisoner exchange process with new keys in the second phase in the agreement. We have no problem meeting with the representatives of the U.S. administration because we realize that it has the power to pressure the occupation. He added, we do not object to releasing Israeli prisoners who hold U.S. citizenship, but within the framework of a comprehensive agreement. Okay?
All prisoners.
Here it is. Speaking to Israeli media, here's what Adam followed through on, because he also spoke to Israeli media as well after this, and I think it's important to hear what he has to say to the Israeli media too.
Suggested exchanging all prisoners, and they suggested a 5-year to 10-year truce where Hamas would lay down all weapons, and where the United States would help, as well as other countries, ensure that there's no tunnels, there's nothing taken on the military side, and that Hamas is not involved in politics going forward.
As you see it today, how close are we to see all hostages released?
I mean, if I want to be optimistic, I would think weeks. They suggested.
Hamas has said multiple times it does not seek to continue governing Gaza and would accept the Palestinian National Unity Administration to take charge or an independent body established in coordination with the Palestinian Authority, similar to the kind proposed under the Arab League-backed Egyptian plan. On the issue of disarmament, Hamas's position has been that it will not lay down its arms unless there is a competent Palestinian force that can defend the rights of Palestinians to self-determination. This is important to recognize as well. Okay? Just so you understand, they're not saying that they will like full blown just keel over and say, okay, Israel can do whatever it wants to us now, we're done. They're simply stating that they are perfectly willing and capable of laying down their arms and dissolving their political administrative state as long as there is a competent political administrative state led by Palestinians with a force, obviously, because without force, without any sort of military, you cannot have any sort of sovereignty whatsoever, which is unimaginably reasonable. If you have any issues with that, I don't know what to tell you. You just want all of the Palestinians to roll over and go away, which is the Israeli position. The Israeli position literally is die. Okay? Having said that, while that is happening on the one hand, Adam Boehler obviously responded to the pressure that was coming in. The Times of Israel said, deal with Hamas possible within weeks, U.S. envoy Baylor says, but it's not like Hamas got the world because I thought they were a bunch of nice guys. That quote was obviously very shocking for a lot of Israel lovers, especially those in Israel, to which he responded with, I want to be crystal clear, as some have misinterpreted. Hamas is a terrorist organization that has murdered thousands of innocent people. They are, by definition, bad people. And as POTUS has said, not a single Hamas member will be safe if Hamas doesn't release all hostages immediately. It's quite difficult to understand exactly where these guys are coming from because what they say and what they do oftentimes is very different. This is something that we've found out about the Trump administration with tariffs. This is something that the Trump administration has done virtually every single day. They will come in, they will boulder in, they will say some insane stuff, they'll do mass layoffs, and then they'll go, oopsie, my bad, and then they'll try to restore it piece by piece. So Adam Baylor, I don't know how to say his last name, going and talking to Hamas directly is very impactful. It's very important, okay? It's unique, it's important, and it's a good thing that it's happening. On the one hand, him going to American television and being like, yeah, no, these guys are just normal guys. We're going to have to talk to them like it's crazy. That's also incredible. That's different. That is very different than the previous modus operandi of the American government. We've also heard this from my goat, Steve Goatkoff, as well. It is interesting that these guys are doing this sort of stuff, but then when pressure comes in, they turn around and they like kind of scale it back with their statements. But focusing on the statements alone will not allow you to understand the full scope. What you must focus on instead are the actions. And in terms of the foreign policy actions, I would say, we still have to wait and see. Okay, we still have to wait and see. Secretary of State Rubio has said, by the way, that Boehler's talks with Hamas were a one-off and stresses it hasn't borne fruit. Rubio added that the main channel for talks on a Gaza hostage deal is White House envoy Steve Witkoff. Now, Marco Rubio saying this, I think, moves the needle in the opposite direction. I will say it's not good. Marco Rubio saying that means that they are, still playing ball with Israel. They're playing damage control with Israel. They're afraid of upsetting and offending Israel, which is not something you should think about. You're the United States of America. It's very frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating that there still is this like weird notion, this weirdness that we are entertaining. We're still entertaining this idea that like Israel holds all the cards when it clearly does not. It is not the case. We hold the cards. We are the United goddamn States of America. But if you wanted to understand why Israel is shutting off energy, shutting off the electricity to the Gaza Strip once again, if you want to understand why Israel is stopping humanitarian aid from going into the Gaza Strip once again, it's a response to that because they can't do anything to America, so they will turn around and punish the civilian Gazan population because that's the only thing they have. Please don't use the phrase holds the cards. Those are Trump's words and it's super gross because of that. I don't care. I've been saying that far before Donald Trump, and I will continue saying that. One last note that I want to mention before moving on to Trump administration's insane domestic policies in terms of dealing with Israel, hurting Israel's feelings and whatnot. Obviously, we'll get to that. Is this incredible analog from history? As the Associated Press reported that Israel is cutting off its electricity supply to Gaza a week after cutting off all supplies of goods into the territory, Israel sought to press Hamas to accept an extension of the first phase of their ceasefire, reneging on the previous three-phase ceasefire agreement that Hamas had initially put forward, that the Brandon administration had claimed Israel had put forward, that Israel has refused to recognize in perpetuity. And the analog here is from World War II. That's right. On April 19th, this is what Dan Cohen is saying. On April 19th in 1943, German Nazis, unable to combat the Jewish resistance of the Warsaw Ghetto and its tunnel network, cut off electricity, water, and gas. Soon after, they burned the ghetto down. He says, Zionist Israel is today's Nazi Germany. I've talked about the Warsaw Ghetto uprising quite a bit as a very apt analog into understanding what has happened in terms of Palestinian resistance, in terms of Palestinian militancy. Okay? I'm going to read this choice quote from the article from the Jewish Historical Institute talking about the Warsaw Ghetto uprising and what the Nazi government's response was to the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, also in Arabic known as the Warsaw Intifada. On the same day, 19th of April, General Jürgen Stroop replaced Lieutenant von Samern-Freckenegg. Germans entered the ghetto again to meet the resistance on the corner of Nalevki and Gaza on Muranowski Square. And they were defended by revisionists from the JMU who had machine guns, or who had one machine gun. After the first day, the insurgents lost one person while Stroop 12. This was a definitive victory for the Jewish fighters, the Jewish resistance. The next day brought combat into the brushmaker's workshop. The gate at the Wolova Street was rigged to blow up. The bomb exploded when the Germans tried to enter the building. At the second attempt, they managed to circle a group of insurgents. Michael Klepfiz distracted the Germans to help his comrades escape. He died of machine gun fire. For his courage, he received the Virtuti Militari Order. And after a bunch of fighting that took place, two flags, a white and blue and red one, were placed on Muranowski Square. Germans tried to negotiate with the fighters, and after failing to achieve an agreement, they cut off electricity, water, and gas in the ghetto area. 1-1. 1-1. Obviously, Israel's awful, but I really don't like the Holocaust comparisons. It downplays how awful the Holocaust was. Yeah, no, I don't care that you have an issue with that. I don't care that you take issue with that. Dan Cohen himself is Jewish making this comparison, and I think it's a perfectly apt comparison. The only reason why it hurts your feelings is because the genocide during the Holocaust, the genocide of the Jews, was completed. That's the only difference here. So yes, the entire point of the entire reason for learning about history, specifically the Holocaust, which is one of the most studied atrocities, okay? But the entire reason for learning about it is so that we don't repeat it again. That's what never again is supposed to imply, okay? Never again doesn't mean, oh, this will never happen again, and it only happened once, and it never happened before. There is no exceptionalism that I will entertain in this process. I never entertained it when we were talking about concentration camps for deportations along the American border, when people would get mad at that and they'd be like, "Oh, how dare you call it a concentration camp?" That is precisely the purpose. Okay, the idea that we can't look at horrifying atrocities throughout history with hopes of recognizing how we got there, how those people got there, and learn some lessons and apply that to ongoing current atrocities, it basically betrays the entire reason for why people learn history. Okay? It is a perfectly apt comparison, and I urge you, chatters who consider this to be unique or exceptional, I urge you to try to seek within, dig deep, and try to figure out why you think it's exceptional. I get that. It's just illegal in my country, which is Germany. Of course. Listen to what I'm saying, okay? Listen to my words. Why does it feel like this is inappropriate in terms of comparison when there is a direct parity here, okay? We learn about history not to just go, oh, wow, that happened. That was crazy. Well, there's no lessons to be learned here. We learn about history specifically so that we don't repeat it. A lot of people don't understand this when it comes to the prosecution of a genocide, right? Nowadays, there is at least some legal structure that has been created to prosecute genocide. Now, obviously, it's somewhat of a toothless institution, whether it's the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court, as we've seen, especially when it comes to directing the legal crosshairs at America or an extension of America like Israel or even America's allies in the Western world. Having said that, the reason why we have a prosecutorial apparatus for figuring out how genocide is being conducted and focus on intentionality rather than the raw numbers is because the entire goal of this regulatory body is to stop it before it finalizes. Does that make sense? Because if we were to only prosecute the genocide after it has been completed, well, then far too many Palestinians will have been ethnically displaced and ethnically cleansed. And one might even say that that has already happened, right? There is some uniqueness, exceptionalism to the Holocaust from a historical perspective, but comparisons are not inappropriate. Equating may be considered inappropriate given the context, but generally it's a significant event to point to because most people understand it. We just need to be careful not to trivialize or downplay the Holocaust. I don't think you are, by the way. Yes, I will never downplay or trivialize the Holocaust. But in terms of the mechanized atrocities, in terms of the mechanized death and destruction that took place in the Holocaust, obviously in the aftermath of the Holocaust, there were these agencies that I'm talking about that were put in place so that there's international law. There are rules of warfare that changed in the aftermath of World War II. So living in the world where we have these rules in place, okay, it's not going to be, especially with the internet, especially when you can like see it happening in real time and completely understand what's going on in a way that like the rest of the world was kind of oblivious to in World War II in Nazi Germany until they arrived at the concentration camps. Like obviously Israel still has limitations in this process. The only exceptional thing about the Holocaust is that it happened in the Imperial Core. Jay Mershon, you said you are moronic, but I do think that it's not the only exceptional thing about the Holocaust, but it certainly is an exceptional thing about the Holocaust, especially considering the many different atrocities that took place prior to the Holocaust during colonialism, whether it be chattel slavery or a lot of Belgian missions in African states, German missions in African states as well. Like all of these things that took place were comparable in almost size and scope as well, but it is not regarded in the same way as the Holocaust because the Holocaust was implemented by a Western nation against people that were not considered in the in-group white at the time, certainly by the German state, but everybody else considered them to be a part of the imperial core in that regard. It was being done to, it was neighbors doing it to their neighbors. But yes, that's not the only exceptional aspect of it, though. That's not correct. I think the industrialization of this genocide was, I think, a unique part of this as well. But I would say that my only issue is the word only. Look at Rwanda. The mechanisms of which genocide took place there are immensely different from the Holocaust. No, absolutely. But I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about colonial violence beforehand from the very same states or like, neighboring states. When the victims are Africans, usually it's just regarded as a part of history, but never paid attention to in the same way. And I think that it's certainly because of the singular industrialized nature of the Holocaust, but also beyond that, the victims as well, for sure. And yes, in terms of the sheer brutality and in terms of the sheer violence, like the situation is very different now. Like we have rules specifically designed to make sure that this doesn't happen ever again. So, of course, those rules are limitations set upon the Israeli state. The Israeli state is also not waging this industrialized warfare that it calls war, but it's actually a genocide upon a captive civilian population it is the belligerent occupier of without American support. They're not doing this on their own. They would never be able to do this on their own, which is part of the reason why there is some limitations to what they can get away with doing. And they greatly, push the boundaries to the best of their ability. Make no mistake. To quote Mark Edelman, a surviving leader of the uprising, all it was about ultimately was that we not let them slaughter us when our turn came. It was only a choice as to the matter of dying. Yeah. Are you regretting voting for Trump yet? Ha ha ha. If you think I voted for Donald Trump, you need to go back to your doctor and ask him to prescribe you lithium because you are hallucinating. Straight up. All right. Anyway, we shouldn't. The reason why I brought the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising as a 1-to-1 analog is because, understandably, people pushed to the brink in the Warsaw Ghetto took matters into their own hands with the limited resources that they had, and they were right to do so. Okay, and the German government that had profound power and control over this captive population greatly increased the violence in that process. It's an apt comparison to any kind of Palestinian militancy that has evolved throughout time and become more violent as a direct consequence of how violent the apartheid administration has been. Lithium is a mood stabilizer, not an antipsychotic. Okay, my bad.